Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Mooncast. I've got Tom on the phone, which is exciting. We
Hello.
haven't spoken for a while, have we?
No, we used to chat a bit more often, but I don't. We've a lot of illness going around in January and heavy work
Yeah,
schedules for all of us. So no, it's good to catch up with you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we messaged each other a fair bit, but we haven't spoken for a while, so it's nice to chat again. And today we're going to have a talk about, well, it's my favourite faction, which is why I've chosen it first, um, which is the Faeries. Um, I think they are quite a popular. It feels like they're
They're,
quite a faction in terms of the look, at least.
they're our
Um,
best sellers, so definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you know, you're the one that sees all the sales on the shop, but I just remember at the Games Expo, they were the one that people were like, oh, that's exciting. They
Yeah,
were the ones that drew
they
people in
definitely
quite a lot.
draw people in because there's no other. I'm yet to find another game that has fairy miniatures. I've seen one or two sparse fairies in other games, but they're they're pretty unique. So I think that's why we get so much
Yeah,
attention from them.
but also fairies in this kind of incarnation, that kind of spiteful, actually slightly not evil, because I mean I know the background on them and they're not really evil, but um, pretty spiteful and bitter.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
All the rest of the races in Moonstone get on quite well, comparatively well. They might have slight prejudices, but they generally cohabit. Apart from the fairies, who just think that they're better than everyone else and stick in their
Yeah,
forests. But I told my
yeah.
girlfriend actually we was going to be doing a podcast on playing with fairies, and she thought that was quite amusing.
Yeah, there's undertones there, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, how to play with fairies is the title. So yeah, but no, I'm excited about this because I really like them too. They were the last factions rules that I wrote, and I do think that every time I write new characters, I write them better. So of
Yeah.
the stuff that's currently available and launched, I think they've got the most interesting character cards. But there's some really cool new stuff coming in future, which is even better. But maybe we'll talk about that at the end.
Yeah. No, we could definitely talk about that at the end. And obviously, I know what some of the um, cool new fairies are coming, and they are very exciting. Um, yeah, I mean the fairies. I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about my sort of starting, because like when I first looked at the Kickstarter, like I said, it was the fairies that made me want to buy into it. Um, I like the look of the whole game anyway, but it was when I saw the artwork for the fairies, I was like, oh man, they look awesome. Um, and that was literally what persuaded me to back it in the first place. Um,
Yeah, I'm really happy with them. I'm happy with the way the miniatures came out as well. I really, really made my caster's life difficult by pushing the boundaries on making them as sort of small and fragile as I could. I wanted them to have that kind of dainty kind of look about them, but then I didn't want them to be really pathetic, tiny little miniatures on the table. So we added a lot of those scenic bases. And basically, the fencer is a giant tree with a small fairy hanging off
yeah,
one of the branches as a
it does,
miniature.
yeah, but it does work really well.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think so
it,
too.
it does work really well. I think, I think you said it in a different in the Games Lounge podcast that you did, that the fairies were always going to be small, but you couldn't just stick them on a base by themselves because they would just look far too tiny.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It'd be
but
a bit
giving them
pathetic.
giving them those scenic bits is what made the difference. And again, it's one of those things. Whenever I mean, the demo days and things that I've done, when I've shown people the models, they look at the favours and go, "Oh my, cool! They come like a cool scenic base of the tree." It's like, yeah, they do. And that again, that's another thing that immediately hooks people in, is they
Yeah,
see that there's a tree, there's a cool looking tree on their base, and like, oh wow, that's cool.
I
Because
think
it's
we
a bit
might
different.
actually at some point go ahead and make a range of resin trees because we get so many compliments on the scenic basis for the fairies. I was thinking maybe there's a line of resin trees that we could produce for Moonstone in the future.
Well, you know what? It's actually quite hard to buy decent scale trees, isn't it?
Yeah,
I
And
mean, we're going off topic here.
yeah, we are. But okay, back to fairies.
Cool. Anyway, so I'll just well, what I'll do, and then I'll talk. What we're going to talk about today is Tom's going to start by giving a bit of background on the fairies. I think that'd be good if you do. Just give us a bit of the lowdown on how you came up with them and everything, and then we're going to go through talking about the individual fairies and then how they work together.
Yeah, sure.
And
sure,
so Tom will talk about obviously his design of them. I'll talk about because they've been ever since I got them from the Kickstarter in Wave 2. They've been my main faction. I've played with very little else actually since I got my fairies. So I played with them a fair bit. So I'll talk about how I played with them, and you can talk about how you played with them. And we'll just have a bit of a chat about it, I think. So yeah, to start with, and at the end we'll talk. Cool. If you want to talk about the new fairies, if you want to leak some new fairy stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would. That sounds good.
Awesome. Well, do you want to go ahead and start then?
I will, yeah. I won't. I'm conscious that I can ramble on for a long time, and I want to get into the discussion on the tactics on the individual fairy. So I won't talk too much about the creation process, other than to say that when I first suggested to people that I was going to add fairies to my new fantasy skirmish game, I got a lot of resistance. People saying, "Oh God, that sounds terrible," and then they've turned out to be probably the most popular race by quite some way. And then they were inspired by some fairies that appeared in Magic the Gathering's Lorwyn expansion set, which is ages old now, but it was a kind of a whimsical fantasy fairy tale Magic the Gathering set, and it had fairies in, and they were spiteful, vicious little bastards. And I thought, oh, this is great. And they were difficult to play as well, like in terms of being kind of complicated and multi-layered, and I thought that was wicked. And I thought that's how fairies should be in a fantasy game. So that was kind of in a nutshell, how they came to be.
Because I've never played Magic the Gathering, or as people would have heard in the first episode of this podcast, pretty much, or most of my experience pre Moonstone was basically usually Warhammer based games and Guild Ball. So I've not actually ever played before. Again, kind of before Moonstone, never played a card based game. Apart from I played board games and things, but never played Magic the Gathering.
I mean, it's a great. It's a huge game. I've really enjoyed playing Magic and plenty of board games over the years, and I wanted to feed a lot of those kind of mechanics and ideas and different kinds of creative into Moonstone, which I think it's got the balance that's basically exactly right for me.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously agree. I've made it pretty clear on various different places that Moonstone is by far my favourite. Well, I always say that it's by far my favourite skirmish game. Because there's no point in comparing Moonstone to Warhammer 40k. Because they're very different games. They're completely different ways of playing table. I mean, the only thing they have in common is that they have models and need to play them on tabletop. Apart from that, they're completely different. So I don't see the point in comparing them to that. But I've played plenty of other skirmish games, and Moonstone is my favourite of the skirmish games I've played.
Cool. I mean, yeah. People are. I don't want to get too off track, but people are really enjoying it. Every time we run demos and things, people are getting pretty much instantly hooked. So that's good to see.
Yeah, with the demos that I've done a fair few demos. Obviously, the ones at the Games Expo, but also I've run three demo days, I think, at my local club, and obviously the 2 tournaments. And yeah, everyone who's come and played a demo has been like, "I want to buy some of this." No one left said, "Oh, it's only been good." So
cool.
Anyway, should
we
talk about the individual fairies?
Well, what I was thinking of doing before we go into the individual fairies was just giving general comments on playing with fairies, because they're very different to, say, playing with humans. If you've got the starter set and you've tried humans and goblins, they're a lot more forgiving than the fairies. The fairies, you would probably need to get a few games under your belt to really understand sort of how Moonstone works before they start to shine. One thing that's interesting about them is they can't really claim territory in the same way as all the other races. I mean, humans, because they've got quite strong passive abilities, can surge forward and stand next to moonstones, guarding them, kind of claiming that center ground. Goblins can do it quite well with their long ranged on Seasick and Dark. Yeah,
Yeah.
they can kind of guard moonstones. And the gnomes love clumping up and are at their strongest when they're tightly packed. So all the other races can do a much better job of basically just running forwards without a plan, whereas fairies really do need a plan. They've got quite short-ranged abilities as well. You'll notice a lot of their spells are 6 inches. That's kind of their default, which is a little bit awkward for them.
Yeah, all the aggressive spells are all maximum 6. It's only the a couple of friendly spells like healing and range and rage that have got 8-inch ranges, isn't it?
That's right. So they have to get what seems like dangerously close to pull off any of their cool stuff. And basically, what all this means is they've got tons and tons and tons of energy. That 5 is the average, 5 energy. So reaction steps really are your friend when you're playing as fairies, and so is the go for it rule, where you draw an extra card in melee, 2 cards in melee. Now, to do those things, the reason reaction steps are really good is because they're not really very hard hitters, and you'll probably want to back away if somebody who's better at fighting comes in close to you. And the reason why the go for it's are great is because most of the fairies have got really good defensive signature moves that get them out of trouble that they may or may not draw organically. So it's always great, like, to leave some energy on your fairies, particularly the fairies that activate early on in the turn. You want to hold a couple of energy on them, which might seem a bit wasteful. And that kind of activation order is a really interesting thing. Other factions, particularly humans, tend to always want to go first. You kind of want to get into the position next to some moonstones or be the first one to make the melee attack. Fairies generally want to activate last because they want to react to the opponent and use their energy on their defensive abilities and their reaction steps to keep themselves safe, and then kind of at the end of the turn then do the stuff that they want to do, which is a little bit counterintuitive to players, let's say, that have come from Guild Ball, where getting to go first is like super important. You don't always want to go first with fairies, and if you're doing the role, well, you rarely do, to be honest. You almost always want to go second and have the final activation of the turn. One of the things which is worth remembering if you are setting up with fairies, when you do the roll off at the start of the game, to choose table edge or choose the initiative bonus, it's almost always worth taking the table edge if you win the roll off, because most other people are going to use their initiative bonus to go first each turn, which is going to play straight into your hands anyway. So yeah, always worth basically taking the table edge, because they do struggle a little bit with picking up moonstones. Even though they've got tons of energy, being all weaklings, they're nowhere near as good as goblins are at grabbing moonstones and scarpering. They kind of they want to grab a few, then perhaps wait for the opponent to pick up a few, and then kill the ones that have picked up the more difficult stones and steal them off them.
Interestingly, talking about, because I actually lost you for a little bit there, so I hope you kept recording it okay, because my internet dropped off a second there.
Yeah.
But what I think is very interesting, what we said earlier, is whenever I've done the roll off, particularly, well, obviously my main opponent is Jack, but playing a few other people as well. Whenever we do the roll off, I always, no matter who I'm playing with, pick deployment zone and not pick to go first.
I think it
Um,
depends how evenly the stones are spread. If they're really, really even, then I normally go for the initiative bonus. But if they're uneven, but not too uneven, then I'll take the table edge. If they're really uneven, you normally do a mulligan. So, but I think with fairies, I would just always take the table edge.
yeah, yeah. And when we started playing, I used to pick to go first because, again, like you said, coming from Guild Ball, that was always what was strongest. And actually, in most games, strongest thing to do, so you get used to doing that. But even I think with not so much humans possibly, but even with because when we first got the starter set, I played mainly goblins and Jack played mainly humans, and I think with goblins it's often better to go second.
I think it's good to go second more often than people realise. Particularly if you've got arcane damage dealing arcane abilities, getting that last activation of the turn is super valuable because if you can fire, let's say you are playing humans who normally do like to go first, but you go second and you've got Flintlock and you've used Quack to boost his
Yeah,
arcane up to 5 and you've used Eric to get him up to 4 energy so he can fire twice, being able to slam 2 shots into your
like
choice of
dog.
enemy on
Yeah,
on the very last activation of the turn means they're going to go into, they got no chance of healing them, they can go into the next turn perhaps
or
having
with less
suffered,
energy for a
you
start.
know,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
like
yeah.
5 wounds, and it's probably reduced their energy by 2 or 3.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So even if they just immediately heal them beginning of the first turn, well, next turn for start, that means they're wasting their healer, but it also means they've
Yeah.
still come energy. I
And
mean,
and the other thing is it puts pressure on people to use their healer early because you generally want to use your healer as late in the turn as you can to see who the
definitely.
best option is. If you stick a load of wounds on someone um, at the end of the turn from a ranged attack, they're going to probably activate their healer straight away at the start of the turn to clear the
Yeah,
wounds off them, which means that they basically now don't have a healer for the turn. So
yeah. I
it's
think
not always obvious which is the right way to go.
yeah, I think possibly the only exception would be humans because they have more healers. Um,
Yeah,
well, Commonwealth, I suppose I should say, because you can mix them into gnomes as well. I think that actually the example, if you talk about Flintlock as example, the best example of the damage dealer in Faeries is probably Diana, from range, because if you can get a couple of horrifying visions off,
yeah,
uh,
it can
I
be
mean,
quite nasty.
I mean, I've killed Vicious Midget in one go, you know,
Yeah,
in one activation before. Um, I've killed uh, Fancy Hat before by again activating Diana at the end, doing about 5 wounds with horrifying vision, and then winning the roll off, activating her first and next round, and just killing him.
yeah.
Um, and he started on full health, and he had he was holding a moonstone as well, and it was just one of the most horrific things Jack had ever experienced.
I mean, goblins and humans are really vulnerable to magical damage. Um,
Yeah,
they've got a lot of um, uh, passive abilities that say non-magical damage, reduce
yeah,
non-magical damage, which fairies just blast straight through. And people
yeah,
like the Vicious Midget and Fancy Hat don't have very many wounds. They rely on their plate armor as their defense. So being
yeah,
able to get straight through it is pretty devastating. Fairies do struggle a lot more with gnomes because gnomes don't have gnome defensive abilities tend to defend against magic just as well as every other kind of attack.
yeah. Interestingly, the last game I played against Jack, which I think we recorded and put on the channel, I can't remember. Um, we swapped, and he used my fairies, and I used his gnomes. Um, it was the first time either of us had used those factions before. And he basically went for I think you talked about it, kind of almost like the pacifist almost style of playing. he just did not let me get into combat with him at all.
Yeah.
He did really well, actually. I was quite an impressive technique that I didn't think about using myself. Is he used all his energy on both Fencer and Wasp in turn 1 to just charge them straight up the board.
Yeah.
And the problem was I had like 3 Moonstones ready for my deployment, and they were all quite high. So I had to immediately, apart from with what's his face, the miner guy, Morris,
Yeah.
who just dug up the one that was 4, obviously 1. I then had to use my energy just to pick up these Moonstones right in front of me, and he'd run up and got these 2 that just stood Wasp and Fencer next to these 2 in the middle. So where we had like 1, so you then immediately pick those up and then use all your energy to just keep backing off. I eventually got into combat, but I can only get 1 person in, really.
Yeah.
And actually, I've never charged up. You just use all my energy turn 1 to just race them up the board before, because as you say, you normally don't want to do that.
You don't, but and we'll get onto it in more detail. But whereas I said that they can't really hold territory, Wasp is pretty good at holding territory because he's got his 2-inch melee range. So one of the vulnerabilities, if you've only got a 1-inch melee range, is that you've used all your energy up, and then somebody with a 2-inch melee is going to wander up to you and be able to hit you without you being able to deal damage in return.
Exactly.
So his 2-inch range both covers more stones. He's very tanky for a
He
fair.
is. He's absolutely brutal.
And he is. If you're playing straight up fairies, I like to throw in Boulder for this purpose as well. But if you're playing straight up fairies, he's definitely the one you want in the middle, like where the Moonstones are.
Yeah. No. Whenever I always take him in the middle, because I think he's the scariest one to face against, and also and we'll get onto him a bit more when we talk about him as an individual. But like you said, he can deal damage pretty well.
He can, yeah, he can. And
the fact that his signature move is a defensive ability, but deals quite a lot of damage is horrible.
It deals a lot of damage as well. He's easy to underestimate as a melee character. I mean, he is a guard. Like his character isn't the kind of I'll fight anyone kind of fancy hat style, or he parks himself places and says like, "Come at me, bro," because we'll get onto him in a bit more detail in a minute. But things like his buckler ability, people can't count critical hits, means that even when heavy hitters do come in, people like Fancy Hat rely a lot on critical hits, and he can basically halve the amount of incoming damage from the best fighters in the game, which is, again, like there's a bunch of reasons why he's great at just holding that center ground where no one else can do it.
Yeah, because at the moment there's only I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously you know them. There's only 2 characters at the moment who ignore passive abilities with some kind of move, and that's Fencer, who's probably not going to be hitting Wasp that often unless you're in a tournament.
Yeah.
And Vicious Midget, who frankly I would never take against Faeries, because he'll just get destroyed by their magical abilities so quickly.
That ignore passive abilities. There's a few others. Morris ignores passive abilities, so he would get through the buckler.
Okay, I don't know the names as
well. There are a few. Those are the ones I can think of at the moment. But
yeah, the ones off the top of my head I could think of, we had, like I say, with Vicious Midget and Fencer, but and obviously Wasp is at risk of some other things anyway. He's still only got 6 health, but anyway, we'll talk more about Wasp when we get to it. Should we start?
Yeah. Let's. Who do you want to start with?
Well, I've like I said before we started this, I've got the book in front of me, so I'm just going to start at the first person in the book, cool. which actually is quite glad to start with this one, because it's one of the more interesting ones for me, which is Tito, because I didn't use her at all to start with, because I just didn't know what to do with her, and I couldn't work out what to do. And it wasn't until I spoke to you at the Games Expo that you helped me understand just how ridiculously good she is.
She is ridiculously good.
Yeah.
I mean, to recap, she's got 6 energy, which is amazing. It's the highest of anyone in the game. She she's a harvester. She is like, you win Moonstone by having the most Moonstones, and she is literally the best fairy at digging up Moonstones. And she's hands down the best character in the entire game, at holding on to them once she's got them
Yeah,
by miles. She's got virtually nothing in the way of damage dealing, but that's fine. You don't, as long as you know what she's there for. It's very easy when you're putting together a troop to just look at damage output potential and pass her by. But let's go through some of her. I mean, she doesn't have. She's a fairly simple card. She's got weakling like all fairies do. She's got an enchanted dagger, so her damage is magical. Can be occasionally useful. I have seen her put a few points of damage on goblins and humans with their generally they generally suffer from magical damage. But it's not really the point of her. Arcane Reflection means that if anybody, she is a classic case of someone who you want to activate as late as you can.
yeah,
Activation order is so important for fairies, but she really does want to activate late, but you're going to probably want to pick up stones with her as well. So that might require you to get in there quickly before someone else has guarded them. So it's always a difficult one choosing when to activate her. But if once she's already got a couple of stones, you just want to make sure that she's one of the last ones to activate.
yeah, yeah.
One of the reasons is the Arcane Reflection. Don't get to use this ability very often because people know that she's got it, and so they don't really target her with arcane abilities. She's already got a
Which is
vague.
kind of the point of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
It isn't really an ability that's designed to be used because no one will be stupid enough to do it on her. But it means that they don't do anything to her.
yeah. As long as she's got energy on her, if anyone tries to shoot her, they're getting that bullet straight back in their own face.
Yeah,
Um, and even if she has already activated and has used up all of her energy, she's still got evade 2, so she's still very resilient
it's
to
pretty hard to hit in the first place with it.
really hard. I mean, you
I
need
mean,
to be
unless you're Braddock with
snare traps,
then
yeah, or something like Fire Spitter that's got Arcane 5, or there's a handful, but the vast majority of shooters in Moonstone have Arcane 3,
yeah,
and they're drawing one card. They're basically flipping the top card. They have to get really lucky. There's no bluffing when you've only got one arcane card. You're
yeah.
just
No, because your opponent
yeah.
will always call bluff. So because there is a
So,
way.
she's kind of invulnerable to most ranged attacks, and then she's also kind of invulnerable to most melee attacks as well because
Yeah, well,
she's
because she's
already
still got melee 4, so she's not.
got, yeah,
She's still got a few cards. It's not like she's like a sort of wizard who's drawing melee 2. She's still got 4, and with 6 energy, like you say, if she's got energy on her, it's quite easy to get up to 6 cards.
exactly. And with 6 cards, your chances of drawing that can't hit me, which reduces all melee damage to 0, is really high. Like, I
Yeah.
could run it through some sort of online calculator, but we're like
Well,
85% or something like that chance of people
yeah,
just not being able to hurt her in melee.
yeah,
So she's kind of disgustingly good and underplayed at the moment. And then just to kind of like finish off the front of the card, she's got vigor, so she can self heal, which is awesome.
yeah,
If she's taken wounds and she's off on the flanks, dealing with like moonstone harvesting or whatever, she can just heal herself up.
yeah,
And misdirection can occasionally be really useful. One of the things, like, as I've said, a lot of other troops will guard moonstones. They'll stand next to them so that you can't get to them. Her misdirect, you can't harvest them when you're engaged. So her misdirection to move a target enemy 3 inches is one of the ways that fairies can get at the stones. Basically, you wait for someone who's moved in to guard a stone and has used all of their energy and they've already activated, and then use Tito to make them step away from the stone, and you use your last activation of the turn, let's say, to sweep in and pick it up with a different character. So that can be useful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, she's and when you look at the front of the card, I think, well, why she got Arcane 5 for? Well, actually, that means it's because I'm guessing, like with Arcane Reflection, it's as if she has the ability, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
that's
if
right.
someone was, I guess, stupid enough to shoot Flintlock at her, then she's using Arcane 5 to fire back at them.
Correct.
Which kind of gives them, like, if she only had Arcane like 2, you might think, well, I don't know, you still wouldn't cast it on her anyway, but I don't know.
So yeah.
Somehow the fact she got Arcane 5 means you kind of notice it even more, that how scary Arcane Reflection would be if someone actually did it to her.
Yeah, she doesn't unfortunately get to use it very often, but
Well, I guess no, because no one, like I said, no one's ever going to hit her with it, are they? Because there's no reason why you're just not cast ability at all.
yeah.
Yeah, but then again, like I said, that's kind of what it's not. I don't know. You look at it, it's not an ability that's supposed to be played. It's an ability that makes her
It's
just
a threat.
Really. It's just really, really hard to kill. Yeah, so like I said, I didn't use her at all to start with, again, because I just couldn't see her. And it wasn't until it completely clicked straight away. And again, like I said, it was at the Games Expo where you just said, yeah, but once she's got a Moonstone, no one can get it off her. So, oh yeah, and that's the point of the game. But I think we'll move on to the next character, and then we'll do a bit of a chat about how they all. So next one's Fencer, which is another one who actually I also didn't quite see the value of straight away.
What?
I know. Well, the reason is because I didn't. The reason I didn't think I always thought she was good in Melee 6 and everything. It's great. Is because I didn't tweak. It wasn't until Jack played with Fencer that we both realised that her signature needlepoint damage not affected by passive abilities was her own passive ability as well.
Yeah.
That did not tweak at all. But actually, that means that she's not a weakling when she's used it.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, so suddenly we looked at it, it's like, oh god, that makes her amazing. With Melee 6, if she's the attacker at 8, if she tries to draw a couple of cards, she's on 10 cards, she's probably going to get that off. It does loads of damage against everything, and then suddenly she was incredibly scary.
She's absolutely obscene. She's probably, in my opinion, the best melee character in the whole game.
Really?
Yeah, I really think that. And I know that you were asking the other day about goblin fairy mixed race builds, and I my immediate thought was to put the Fencer in with goblins because she's just a beast in melee. She's so good. She's such a murder machine.
Well, also, she doesn't particularly need other fairies around.
No, she doesn't.
Because other fairies, like I think it's there's a couple of other fairies that say when a friendly fairy does. But Fencer doesn't have anything like that, so she doesn't need friendly fairies around her. She needs someone that might heal her, but most healing spells just say
friendly.
So,
in fact, they don't even say friendly because if you're playing in a multiplayer game, sometimes you can heal one of your opponents as a favor because they might help you out in some other way. But
interesting idea. But yeah, so just to look to the front of a card, weakling, same as every other fairy. Although I think it is actually less relevant with her, given needlepoint.
The only thing with it is it does mean that her thrust is somewhat predictable because she really wants to pull off her signature move more so than practically any other character. But it's counterbalanced by the fact that her signature move does at least 1 point of damage against every other attack, and it's unreducible. So she's always going to get damage through if she does a thrust.
And it's also because she got spiteful as well. If she has suffered wounds previously in combat because they blade sweeping cut and hit her back again, she's going to get something back anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's only one wound, that's enough to just keep her alive.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah.
So Swift is extremely useful.
Yeah.
When making a reaction step whilst engaged by an enemy, you may move 2 inches. This obviously gets her out of trouble if it's a fight that she doesn't want to be involved in. Although I have seen it, people use it kind of craftily to leap her forwards as well. You kind of like at the start of the turn, if somebody has moved in to engage her, you use her 2-inch reaction step to kind of like sort of step past them to try and get deeper.
Oh, right.
Use it offensively.
My immediate thought about that is if Seasick or Doug just sit 3 inches from her, she can go and engage them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because especially if she's -2 against piercing damage, that's particularly horrible for Seasick. Because his ability is piercing, so it takes that damage off him.
Yeah, and obviously the reason why that Volta -2 to piercing is so useful is she loves to play her signature move, which is a thrust, and obviously she would be very vulnerable to a counter thrust because the thrust versus thrust is 3 damage.
Yeah.
But to her, and on the thrust, the damage type is only piercing. To her, she's like, nah, it's not too bad.
Yeah, definitely.
Reducing it by -2. And like you say, the Spiteful's great because she almost always does damage with her melee attacks, which means she almost always restores wound every time she does a melee attack. So she's pretty awesome. Her Enfeeble, I don't always use it because quite often it's more valuable to get those 3 extra melee attacks. But where it's really good is if you're going up against someone like Gotchgut that's got +2 damage across the board, or anyone that's got, or Fritz, or someone who's got a high static damage, and you still want to fight them. It can allow you to fight people more safely, basically. So,
when I played against Jack and he was using Faeries, he used it against young Jack, which worked really well because he was my only melee character I had like up near anyone. So I got young Jack into a really good position where when he activated next, he was going to be able to get into combat with someone and probably help do some damage. And Jack just enfeebled him. I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah. I mean, I remember enfeebling and also using Clumsy Klutz on Baron von Fancy Hat and getting him down to like -5 damage. And then all the fairies piled in and took a pot at him once in a game. So that can be useful. But she's great. She's one of the fairies I would probably never not bring, to be honest.
Yeah, I think she probably would be for me. It's harder the fairies. I think I do find it, and actually we'll get onto later to the one there's actually only one particular ring now because I used to not include Tito bringer, and I used to taking Fencer, but now I find it very hard not to bring her. But we'll talk about builds. I think after we talk about the individual, maybe.
Sounds good.
Too many times, which you already have plenty already. Right, we'll move on to Freya then.
So Freya,
I mean Freya, if you're just using pure fairies, is definitely an auto include.
Yeah,
because she's a healer. So
for the time being, there's another fairy healer.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I know.
But for the time being, you have to have a healer in any troop of Moonstone. There's definitely some tactics in do I want 1 healer or 2 healers in Commonwealth builds, but in fairies,
definitely.
She's the thing is, I often find I'm like, oh, this is an auto include. Oh, this is an auto include. Oh, this one's an auto include. And you're like, I've only got 6. Like, which one? Which one don't I bring? But
it's quite hard, which is going to get even harder with the next lot coming.
Yeah,
I mean, at the moment, only with the number of models there are, it's a bit easier. But yeah, I mean, I know what a lot of stuff's coming is, and yeah, it's going to be much harder to do troops, or not much harder. It's just spoiled for choice. It'll be.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be a lot more variety rather than it just being humans versus fairies. It's going to be much more complicated in the future, but in a good way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Back to Freya. She's a great healer. She's Arcane 5 and she's got 5 energy, so she can do her healing twice.
Yeah.
When she activates, she can clear most of the wounds off her entire troop as long as she's healthy
Yeah.
herself.
Yeah. Also, because her troops, because fairies don't have a lot of wounds, if they've only suffered 3 or 4, then she could probably heal them.
Yeah, exactly. And also Trickster. So Trickster's a ability that I'm going to put on a few more characters in future. It really, really messes with people's heads massively. So basically, if you bluff, there's a few abilities on the fairies that encourage you to bluff. If you bluff, you get to do the and you reveal that you just bluffed. You get the effect. So let's say she's doing a fizzle pop, and she declares that she's got 2 pink, and she's got 5 cards in hand. You're probably going to go, yeah, that's fine. She could go, ha ha ha. I was bluffing. It was a green card or whatever. She gets to do that 2 damage that she declared, and then get to do the ability all over again for free.
Yeah.
So you can use it with healing, but you're less likely to because she can already heal pretty well even without relying on this. But with the fizzle pop, she's underestimated for the fizzle pop. You almost always people take her as a healer and use the healing ability and don't look at her other abilities all that much. But if you use Trickster in combination with fizzle pop, I mean, we played a game at, was it UK Games Expo, where we were just warming up at the start of the day, and I was playing goblins and you were playing fairies, and you were repeatedly slamming me with these fizzle pops.
Yeah, it was great fun.
Yeah, and they get straight through the goblin armor. I was using goblins, and they push you back an inch. So I was walking up to moonstones to guard them, and then you were reacting by fizzle popping me quite a few times and knocking me back a few inches so that they were, available for you to grab, or forcing me to waste my jog next turn to get back into base contact with them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, basically, yeah. Which I think it was the main impact in. I remember that game because I remember me being hilarious with all the fizzle pops. But yeah, it was like you had dug up next to a moonstone. Oh, next time I'll be able to dig it up. No, you're not. I'm gonna push you just far enough off it. So you think, you were like, oh, and then next time I could jog around the other side, and then I can. No, you got to jog just where you are.
Yeah, it was so irritating. But it was exactly, it was perfect play, to be honest. You did really well. But the thing is, like, she is a great healer, and a lot of the time you're gonna save her for her healing. But those fizzle pops can be great, particularly if you've got her along with Butterfingers, because he's also got fizzle pop. They're both on Arcane 5. They can both do it twice without any extra energy, and putting an extra energy on them so that they can do it 3 times is definitely a viable option. So you can basically hit the same target in theory with 4 or 5 fizzle pops. So it's only X damage, but if you hit someone 5 times with 5x magical damage, that's really nasty.
Yeah, it's probably gonna kill them.
Yeah, but I'm going back to Trickster. What you can do is you can basically train your opponent. So the first time you do a fizzle pop, even if you've got a pink card in hand, I mean, if you've got a pink 3, you might as well use it and say it's a pink 3. But let's say you've only got a pink 1 in your hand, you might as well bluff and say you got a pink 2, Because with 5 cards, it's quite believable, and there's always the threat that you've got extra cards in hand, and they'll probably let you have that. So you get the extra damage from saying that it was a 2 when really the best you could have played was a 1. Then you get a whole new hand of cards, and you can do it all over again. So you'll probably now genuinely have a 2 or whatever and play that. You can get like 4 damage through. But the most important thing is you've just trained your opponent to think that you're a liar.
Yeah.
And this is where it's like playing the head games that you can do with fairies is so interesting. Once your opponent thinks you're a liar, they're now going to start calling bluffs out. So later on in the game, you might call a pink 2 on your fizzle pop when you do have a pink 2, and they're going to say, whereas they would have normally just gone, yeah, that's fine. Now they're going to call you a bluff, and then you can put down your pink 1 and do extra damage then. Does that make sense? It's quite a weird ability to use.
Yeah.
It messes with people's heads.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like a complete mind game. Do you think, well, if you've not bluffed, you get an ability, but if you've bluffed and I call it and you've not bluffed, and it makes me have to think about it so much more.
Yeah, and if you're the kind of, I demo the game and I see quite a lot of people who have quite a lot of skill actually in the way that they play their arcane cards to act like they're nervous or act like they're confident or whatever. If you're the kind of person who likes playing those kind of mind games with arcane, then Freya is brilliant because that trickster will just literally mess with everybody's head, and you can, like I say, train people and then punish them for it, and then flip back again, and you can have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. The other person that I played quite a lot with, this guy called Ryan. He came to the tournament. He said his favorite part of the game is the arcane bit, which is interesting because for most people it's the melee. His favorite is the bluffing arcane bit, and I kind of, he said it with the last time he played it. Last time he played, it would be on the video actually. He said, you always tell the truth, because I say he thinks that I never bluff, and it's almost like I've kind of, I don't think I necessarily did it on purpose. I don't know, but trained him to think that I'm never going to lie, and then I just got a couple of bluffs off. I got a couple of easy ones off, just like, oh yeah, it's a green 2, and it's like, yeah, but you never lie, so you haven't. It wasn't.
Some people are great at it. I was playing a guy this week in my local game store, and he basically so over-egged his card. I was like, oh, he's obviously trying to make me think that it's a bluff. But he was double bluffing basically. So
yeah,
you can do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you kind of want to read them, but then if they're,
I thought I was reading him, but actually he was 2 steps ahead, and it ended up punishing me.
Yeah. Cool. And obviously she's got like Tito, she's got can't hit me as well. Although she's only got 2 melee, so
yeah, she's only got 2. So
I mean, she's definitely a person. If you had to activate her early on, if you needed to heal someone, want to leave that extra energy on her, so that she can do 2 more cards and hopefully get can't hit me.
Yeah, I think I would always keep that 1 energy on her for the can't hit me, because if it looks like there's any chance of her being in danger, if she's really far back on the board, maybe not worry about it. But if you've come forward to do a fizzle pop, which I do recommend, by the way, then definitely worth saving some energy, because she's, all of her abilities cost 2, so Spell, fizzle pop, and healing cost 2. So kind of saving 3 energy would be excessive, too much, I think. Yeah, but saving 1 for the attempt at drawing extra cards so they can't hit me could be really good.
Yeah, definitely.
And Dizzy Spell, basically, it's like a less good version of Graddock's Forgetfulness, but Graddock's Forgetfulness is amazing. So you shouldn't overlook Dizzy Spell either, because sometimes if your opponent is giving you grief with a certain ability and you're like, I don't know how to deal with it, sometimes it's very easy to forget that Freya can just activate and stop them doing it.
Yeah. Well, she could make Braddock forget.
She could make Braddock forget forgetfulness, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I think that's Freya done. We'll move on to the next one then, which is this one's my second favourite fairy after Diana, which is Wasp.
Yeah.
And we've talked about him a bit before, obviously earlier on. So I don't think we need to talk about him quite as much. But
yeah,
he is, as you said, he is the tank of fairies. Melee 5, 2-inch melee. It's spiteful as well. Additional damage on piercing, plus a brutal signature move. I mean, there was a game. Again, I think we recorded. I can't remember. I think we recorded. I was playing against Jack's gnomes, and Wasp, I think, single-handedly killed 4 gnomes. Because he bunched them all up in the middle where they want to be, and then he just put himself so that everyone was within his melee zone, but he wasn't engaged by anyone else. And then he literally just did an attack on one person, 2 another person, and killed them. He killed 2 gnomes in 1 activation, and then I started first the next turn and killed someone else straight away.
Yeah, but that's impressive. I mean,
that was particularly, and I got a good card, and I think it was particularly good. But it did just because he was trying to hit me, and he's just like, "Oh, but you've got Buckler, so I've only got 1 card." It's like, yeah, and mine's a high guard, so.
And having that signature move on the high guard, it's something very easy to overlook when you're first looking over fairies and thinking, what can these guys do? But it means that he does a crazy amount of damage, like against a falling swing or a sweeping cut. He's doing 4 damage, I think.
Yeah.
-1 for his weakling, but +2 from his javelin, if you choose.
Yeah, this is plus for those, yeah.
Yeah, because the diving attack is a piercing. So he's doing 4 damage, but only receiving the damage that a high guard would. Even a rising attack against a high guard doesn't do that much damage. So, it's great. And you can always.
So go on.
You can always, as with most other characters, you can always trip people out because there is a defense against his high guard, which is a high guard being played in response to it.
Yeah.
So once you've trained your opponent to think, oh, he always does diving attacks, it's going to, I'll play a high guard, you can, change it up and do a rising attack this time, which can gain his +2 damage to piercing. So, but you're going to probably 4 times, 3 times out of 4, you're going to want to probably do that diving attack, the high guard signature move, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he is mainly about that really about combat. But I have used Rage before. I used it on Diana actually. Then I think she could then pick up a moonstone. It was like a 4 moonstone. She could pick it up with all her energy. I don't use Rage too much.
I mean, that's how I tend to use it as well. Obviously, you can use it to make one of your other fairies a better melee character, but I tend to find it's a lot more useful to use that ability to make one of your fairies a better harvester.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to just shuffle over. I need to get near. Hope this doesn't mess up. No. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's for the moonstone. Well, because it's either him he's giving it to himself to, which kind of think, well, if I'm gonna, it's a bit of a waste making him slightly better in combat.
Yeah.
Or the only other combat one is obviously Fencer we talked about, and she's got ability that gets rid of weakling anyway. So it really is more about picking up moonstones, which is just as useful because, as we said at the beginning, that's the aim of the game.
So. Yeah, and I'll quite often use Rage as because he's normally out of range on turn 1 for anything else. So I normally use Rage on turn 1 to allow one of the other fairies to pick up a moonstone. And if you stick it on you stick it on Tito, she can probably pick up 2 in turn 1.
Yeah, definitely. There is that. Absolutely.
Which is
Or it means she can pick up a one that's like a 4
yeah.
in turn 1 without having to use it do it in 2 turns. But yeah, I think he's to a certain extent one of the easiest fairies to use. Because you don't have to worry so much about him getting either isolated. I mean, he'll still die if you're not careful, but
Another
he's,
thing
he's weak.
to bear in mind is you can always javelin even if you're in melee with someone, you can always just throw javelins at them. You're less likely, you'll do less damage than if you do a melee attack, but you're safe.
Yeah,
You know,
I've done that before myself when I've been in combat and actually he's lost a few wounds. I thought I don't really want to risk another attack, and I'm just going to javelin you instead and just do 2 damage. Great, but at least I've done 2 damage and not having any in return. So I have done that before myself as well.
One of my favourite ever Wasp moments was I got him up to 15 energy with Silvertongue's Whispered Secrets, and I just happened to have, the perfect hand and kept being called bluff, bluff, bluff over and over and over when I just had all of the pinks. Got up to 15 energy so I could throw 7 javelins.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, and just basically murdered Fritz, who was nearby, and threw a few javelins at other people as well. That's great.
God, that's horrible. Cool. I think we need to mosey on a little bit through these fairies to talk about those. So, next one actually is one that I'm going to let you talk about more because I haven't used him very much. Which is Butterfingers.
Yeah, he's probably one of the ones that I drop out of my fairy lists most often as well, which is a shame because he's got some really cool abilities. He's got Fizzle Pop just like Freya, and because you're not going to worry about saving him for healing, you can use his Fizzle Pop a lot more often. And I think the 2 of them together, both Fizzle Popping away, is great. Yeah. Target gains weakling is one of those clumsy cluts. I've used it to soften up a opponent for like a melee character like Baron von Flancia or something. But it's also really good if you can see that they're planning on picking up a Moonstone, and you can basically deny them that by making them a weakling, so that it's too difficult for them to dig up. And then Butterfingers, which is obviously his like namesake ability. One of the things about it is that it makes a lot of the upcoming abilities, like Kaufman's ability, that interact with Moonstones, you take the Moonstone off them, so you transfer possession from the other character to your character. And some of the new thieves and things that we've got coming down the pipeline do that as well. The Butterfingers' ability is not quite as strong as that. They just drop the Moonstone next to them. So
yeah, but it's got longer range though. Most of those abilities are 1-inch range, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But all it means is you just need to be a lot more careful about activation order, and activation order is kind of the thing with fairies. So if you wait until somebody has already completed their activation, because otherwise they'll pick it up. They'll just activate and pick up the Moonstone if you make them drop it. So you kind of want to make somebody drop a Moonstone after they've activated, but you then want to move in with another character like Wasp, so that they can't pick it back up again.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way to use it. So timing is really important. The other thing is it can just be really useful just to do it right at the end of turn 4. If it's a close game and it's three Moonstones to 4, you use Silvertongue to put an extra energy on Butterfingers, and then fly Butterfingers in to do his Butterfingers ability twice to make 2 people drop a Moonstone, and you've suddenly knocked them down from being in possession of 4 down to possession of 2 and win the game.
Yeah, which is good because fairies I think can possibly struggle sometimes late game. So it can be a good late game ability. Definitely.
Yeah. And he often can be ignored because he doesn't do huge amounts of damage. People can often not prioritize killing him.
Because he doesn't on paper look particularly scary.
No. And then his fairy dust ability, again, it's on high guard, so it doesn't take very much damage. He's got melee 3. Same with the others. If you save back an energy to bump it up to 5, you can almost always get his fairy dust off. It's on a high guard, so he's hardly going to be taking any damage. And then he reduces the damage by -2.
Yeah.
So and then he makes the enemy discard 2 energy. So he's got a very solid defensive ability, like a lot of the others.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it means if they haven't killed you with that one, there's a good chance. But like especially with humans that only on average have I think 3 energy. If they haven't killed you and you've got it off, they can't hit you again.
Yeah.
So it does make him safe for that.
So like a lot of fairies, like they are very vulnerable because they don't have very many wounds and they don't have damage reduction. But between the -2 evades and all of their various signature moves that defend them in melee, they are surprisingly hard to kill.
Yeah, and with like I said, with all the energy, it's very easy for them to just back off a lot. Like if you're 5 inches from them and you've got a 1-inch melee, you will not get into combat. Because they'll just keep backing away. You're moving 4 inches to get in melee, they'll back off an inch. And they've got more energy than you, so they will be able to get further away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's normally a good trade for fairies to, trade 1 energy with a reaction step and make the opponent spend 1 energy to step closer to you because you've got so much more of it.
Especially if it's like their melee character and basically you're just pulling their melee character in away from everyone, which isn't what people want to be doing. They don't want you don't usually want to be isolating your melee characters. You still want them to be.
That's right.
Within healing range or buffing range. So if you can tempt them forward by gradually stepping away and they take the bait, then suddenly their melee man is, which again usually also don't have like magic protection, is suddenly surrounded by some fairies with no energy.
Yeah, definitely.
And then you start hitting them, like you say, with like fizzle pop or javelins and things, and they'll go down. I think we'll move on again because I want to get through the last 2 before we then have a little bit more of a general chat at the end, because we've been talking for I think almost an hour now.
Yeah, I thought that might happen. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So next one is again one of my favourite, and he is definitely for me has always been an auto include, which is Silver Tongue. Just because I think for me, he's the most horrible fairy.
He's great, isn't he?
He's great. He's absolutely great, but he's definitely the most horrible one to play against. I absolutely love him. I mean, I know that Jack hates him, obviously, as the opponent, but get the card quickly. Obviously, Weakling is normal. Melee 4 is pretty good, and Arcane 5 is great, and obviously the -2 is normal. Fairy Mischief makes him incredibly good if he's within 6 inches of Freya and she's just bluffed.
Yeah,
that's horrible. I have managed to do it before. And then one of the games that we recorded, I don't think he had 9 energy because 2 fairies had bluffed, and he ended up with 9 energy. So he managed to.
That's savage! You can do 3 mind controls then.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did do. He did 3 mind controls, and Jack cried a little bit. And actually, he's not awful in combat because obviously he's got threats and promises, which is great. So damage is reduced by -3 anyway, and then you kite him again. But he's got concealed dagger. So if you play rising attack with him, suddenly he's +1 damage.
And that's the really cool thing, because threats and promises is an upgrade for rising attack. So you can play your rising attack, and he's quite likely to get it off with his melee of 4. And then once cards have been revealed, you can decide whether to do the damage of the rising attack, which he's at +1 for, +1 piercing. or you think, oh, I don't like this. Then you do the threats and promises. It's kind of like he's got the dagger like hidden behind his back, but he's trying to talk you out of it, and then if you want, you could just shank him.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely.
Depending on what they play. So, yeah, no, he's not bad. Like, this is the thing. Like, so many of the fairies are not that bad when you deploy their signature moves in melee. They can get themselves out of so much trouble. And then
mind control, which is just well, it is horrible. The first time I really used it really well, and I felt really bad, was against my friend Ryan, and I did tell him about the ability. I wanted to make it really clear because I hate winning games just because my opponent doesn't know the players well.
Definitely.
But I really made it clear to him how good mind control was before we started, and he'd only played a couple of games at that point. I think he either forgot or didn't quite tweak enough. But he basically had Fritz within melee range of Eric.
Nice.
So I did mind control on Fritz and killed Eric in one go, and he just again had let it die.
I've seen him be incredibly effective against goblins with Seasick, because Seasick, this 3-inch melee range, can quite often hit a healer behind him.
Yeah.
At +2 damage, which makes people cry.
Yeah. The other, I mean, it is really fun for making players attack each other in combat. But the other really fun thing I did with it once is I couldn't get in it because I was really scared about Quarrel shooting. He was in range of Diana, and although he could be minuses, he'd already buffed him. I can't remember who is it. Is it Mama Gimbal who gives him like +2 arcane?
Yeah, +1 arcane.
+1 arcane. So he was buffed up as well, ready to fire his crossbow at someone. And I couldn't get in range with Silverfang on Quarrel, but I was in range of Craddock. Craddock cast Forgetfulness on Quarrel.
Awesome.
So he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll be fine," and then I suddenly realised, yeah. So he couldn't fire his crossbow because I made him forget it.
There's so much devious stuff you can do with this. I like to target anyone with a pistol or someone like Fancy Hat, because he can fire his pistol. He'll probably damage. He'll do some wounds to one of his own people. He'll have to reload. That's the other thing. Like, if you use an ability that's once per game unless reloaded, then it's used. The other thing is, which people often don't realise about mind control, is you can play a catastrophe if you happen to draw one in your hand. There's nothing stopping you. You can just declare a catastrophe.
Yeah.
So
and
weapons explode as well.
Yeah, really good against really scary if you like Flintlock.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get close enough to Flintlock, because Flintlock's got, and same with Quarrel, they've got such long ranges, he often can't pull it off, but he can easily pull it off against Fancy Hat's pistol and all of the goblin pirates that are coming along that have all got pistols. You can make them shoot one another. It's hilarious.
Yeah, definitely. Right, then move on to the last one then, and then we'll have a bit more of a general chat about. I mean, we talked about playing them together anyway.
Before we move past Silvertongue, I just want to say about Whispered Secrets.
Oh yeah, definitely go
because it's in my opinion, one of the most important abilities in the whole of all the abilities on all the cards. I really the plus, restoring 1 wound isn't really that great. Because fairies don't have very many wounds, it can be useful sometimes to restore 1 little wound, because it means they'll get more energy at the start of the next turn. But being able to give extra energy to the person of your choice is always so useful. You can allow Butterfingers to do 2 Butterfingers, for example, or 2 Clumsy Klutzes, or allow say the Fencer to enfeeble twice, or Wasp to rage twice, or throw his javelin an extra time. Basically, it allows so many extra doubling ups. There's a cool trick that you can do. You probably won't pull it off all that often, but it's pretty hilarious when you do, which is Fairy Mischief says whenever a friendly fairy within 6 inches bluffs successfully, you may reveal this card and the character gains 2 energy. That includes him.
Yeah.
So you bluff. So if you do Whispered Secrets targeting yourself, so you're trying to give yourself X energy.
Yeah.
And let's say you've managed to draw a pink card, but you don't use it. Like you put down like a green card or something, and you say, "Oh yeah, I got a pink too." And they look at your hand of 5 and they're like, yeah, you probably do have a pink too. I don't want to risk giving you extra energy. You can then reveal your green card. He gains the 2 energy back that you just spent, plus the 2 energy that you declared, which now puts him up to 7 energy.
Yeah.
And restores all of his wounds.
Even if you just said, to be really safe, if you just, you could almost do it quite sort of blasé and say, oh, it's just a red one.
Yeah.
And they'll go, yeah, you probably got a red one. He still gains 3 energy, so he still gets him back up to, he'll have 6 energy then.
Puts him on 6, which means you can then do mind control twice, which is the important thing.
Yeah.
That's what you're setting up. So you can make that melee character hit the support character twice instead of once, which can make the difference between killing them or not. So you can't pull it off all the time because once people think, oh, you're always bluffing, then it gets a bit weaker. But then you might get lucky enough to, they call you bluff, you said it's a 2 pink, it is a 2 pink, and then you've got a pink 1 as well, and you can still get him up to 6 energy that way.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
And the worst comes to the worst, even if you mess it up totally and you do the Whispered Secrets and you get nothing out of it, you've still got 3 energy left, so you can still do the 1 mind control that you were going to do anyway. So it's kind of free opportunity to mess with your opponent's head and possibly get 2 mind controls off instead of 1.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, definitely. Right, on to the last one then. The last one in the book, which is my favorite. I can't really describe why she's my favorite character. She's my favorite character in the whole game. Which is Diana. I can't quite put my finger on why. I mean, the model is fantastic. I think part of it is because the model was voted for, wasn't it, by the
yeah.
And it was the model I voted for. So that kind of you kind of almost have like a slightly vested interest in it, or at least I had a slight more attachment to the model than the other ones because I'd voted for it.
That makes sense.
I mean, she's obviously kind of which is the queen of the fairies. So she's that kind of she has that almost, and you see that in the model and the artwork that she's surrounded by that sort of rib cage thing. She's kind of almost like on a pedestal from the other fairies.
She is, yeah, definitely.
And that's kind of in the sort of fluff side of it. But I mean, the only thing about, and I'll say this bit, I'll say at the beginning, but I would never take her personally without Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because she's one that doesn't have as good a
defensive signature.
So I mean, that was just like she's great fairy, so it's not exactly a chore.
She's great to activate early in the turn as well. I've said a lot about wanting to save various other fairies for as late in the turn as possible, but because she's got the feed on fear, target loses X energy, and you get to redistribute it. Again, back to all I was saying, 1 extra energy on most of the fairies makes them suddenly so much better because it allows them to do their, 1 extra energy on Silver Tongue allows them to mind control twice instead of once. That can be really useful. And if you see someone who is threatening you, who's kind of holding that center ground, like Fritz or something, making them lose X energy, like it's a really strong first move of the turn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way I've used it before is much more simplistic in that to some extent. Is I did it on, I think it was on Fritz. And it was really it's pretty risky getting within 6 inches of Fritz if you're anyone. I got within 6 inches of Fritz, cast Feed on Fear, got a red 3, took all his energy off him, gave it all to her, and then killed him with horrifying visions 3 times.
Savage, yeah.
You know, kind of certainly negated the use of Feed on Fear because he was dead to not use energy in the first place. But you know, so I didn't know I was going to get the red 3, but it then meant I could cast it 3 times, and I just took his heaviest hits off the board, and it just meant that she was then safe because he was the only thing threatening her. And then he's carrying a Moonstone. I can't remember, that was a while ago, but it's just, you know, someone like Fritz who's got, he's got like +1 evade, so he's quite easy to hit with Arcane. But at the same time, he's got quite a lot of health, so he's not one you expect to just die.
Yeah. But it's X +1, and if she's doing it 3 times, you would expect to about 7 damage is probably the average, I would have thought. So I think you could bring it down.
I don't think I even drew particularly good cards, to be honest. I think it was just like 2s, but you just doing 3, 3, and 3.
Yeah,
which was just enough to finish him off.
And the other thing about her, of course, is she's got the Good of the Glade. So I rarely, I usually do Horrifying Visions the first time I cast it on Arcane 6.
Yeah. I usually, at least once when I'm casting a spell with a wound a fellow fairy, because I think it's worth it.
I quite often put the wound on her because she doesn't lose an energy on her top wound.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because the only other one.
Or I'll put it on someone like Tito because I know she can self-heal.
Yeah. Or even Freya's were not bad. Like if you're near the end of the turn and no one else is going to need healing, you just do it on Freya. Because she'll just heal herself and things like that. But I do like Diana a lot. I mean, she's probably the best damage dealer from range they've got, isn't she?
She is at the moment.
At the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah. The other thing we haven't mentioned about, actually, we'll talk about her. We've mentioned like she's weakling. It can't dagger again, so she's not even that bad in melee because she's doing magical damage. Her signature, Dance with Death. Actually, well, it does have a defensive side of it, actually, because she can move 2 inches, can't she?
It's not as strong as the others.
No.
You know,
it does mean she can do a bit of damage, possibly, in return, if she's within range.
I mean, it's quite a flexible ability because it can either get her out of trouble with the 2-inch move or ensure mutual destruction if they kill her, that you take them down as well.
Yeah.
But it's nowhere near as reliable as some of the other fairies, can't hit me's and things like that. She is the most vulnerable to melee attacks, I would say.
Yeah. Again, it's like, which is against why I always take her with Gotcha and just stick Gotcha next to her.
Yeah.
You know, it means that you've got a little more confidence about pushing up out of the board. You've got to be careful that she doesn't get pulled in somehow by something like Agatha or Boom Boom Boom. I mean, she's -2 evade, so it's going to be tricky for them. But I have had it where she's been pulled out of that Gotcha range before. She didn't die, thankfully, but it is scary when she's suddenly isolated.
Yeah. I mean, I've used her quite often without Gotcha most of the time, and I just have a general acceptance that if she's gonna die, it's okay, it's fine.
Yeah,
she'll do something useful beforehand.
Yeah, certainly. I just realized something that we didn't mention at all so far, which is something that is really useful that fairies can do that no one else can do, is they can fly over stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Which is
if there's a lot of water features and wooded patches on your board, then that's really useful. And buildings, they're great with buildings because they can fly through windows and doors as part of their jog action for free, whereas everyone else is paying 2 energy to open the door. They just go straight through. So they can be really good on a more densely packed terrain board. The other thing is because they've mostly got quite short ranged abilities, 6 inches. If you have like a forested board with loads and loads of trees all over it, that's gonna mess up some of the longer ranged attackers like Flintlock and Quarrel. But it won't bother the fairies that much because they're close enough that they're normally going to do a jog that gives them the right angles. So
yeah,
basically, they like terrain more than some of the other factions.
definitely. But also they also like it because if they're behind a nice piece of obstacle terrain, they are literally impossible to hit with arcade.
Yeah,
Already -2, and if they're in that direct line through the middle of the
yeah. Minus
base,
4 cards. Yeah,
only -4. Um, so yeah, it means I mean Tito standing behind a piece of terrain is just um,
yeah. So
yeah,
'cause when we did the tournament recently, well, it's a little while ago now, at Firestorm, we set up themed boards. So we picked locations on the map of Torbert and designed the boards according to the locations. And one of them was a forest terrain board, and it was just loads and loads of trees all over. There was no like open center like I quite often set up like town center type boards with a courtyard in the middle or something. This was just trees everywhere. And everyone said it was their favorite board to play on. That it was really interesting and it gave loads of different tactical options and they had to think really differently about the game. But I think a board like that would definitely favour fairies.
yeah. Interestingly, I win obviously you were there, so I did try to do a similar thing at the tournament I ran as well. Try and make the boards very different. So there was one board that was very much like a town centre, one that was a forest board, and then the third one was a like village board. So that had the village one had lots of little scatter terrain. I had like piles of logs and things, whereas the forest one was all trees. It does make for an interesting different play experience, actually, doesn't it? The different boards.
It does, yeah.
And that's kind of going off topic slightly again, but I realised that recently when I play tested the mutiny scenario, which obviously is a 1 foot by 2 foot board, just how different the game was on a board that was smaller.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting. I mean, this is going completely off topic, but I think it's quite an interesting observation. I kind of want to make it anyway. When we played that mutiny scenario, it changed the game. I mean, obviously it's a scenario, so it's not supposed to be quite the same anyway. But normally you're going getting moonstones, you're backing off with those characters and bring other ones forward and things. This one was just last man standing. It's just who has ever survived, because you start off with LA and stuff. Just a completely different way of playing. But that's the great thing about playing the scenarios, isn't it? Is that's what they're for.
I mean, I like sleepyheads because you quite often start, right in the thick of it. You're all coming out of the buildings and waking up next door to one another in doorways and in windows and things, and you get straight into the
that's what made it. Yeah, and that's what made it a really fun demo game, wasn't it? Is that you started because otherwise, because turn one is obviously often a bit of just shuffling up and shuffling around and finding your feet where you want to go, and that can be harder for a new player. Whereas actually on a demo, you just want to get some melee in and you want to get some spells off, because that's the meaty part of the game where you hook people in.
Exactly.
So it was good for that. So we kind of got to round off a little bit, as this is touching on an hour and a half now. Talking about just fairies generally as builds. When I said that I would never take Diana without Gotchka, and like you, I do like Boulder in a fairy list as well. I don't like having both the big guys, so if I took Boulder, I probably wouldn't take Diana.
Yeah.
It's fine because that's a good and there's plenty of other choices. The only other, I mean, obviously you'd always take Freya, because I mean, and the other thing is, I think you'd always take Freya because obviously you could take Beaky, but I think I'd always take Freya over Beaky just because I think of the way she works with other fairies.
I think
Um,
she's got no super obvious synergy with fairies, but once you've got your mind into that fairy mindset of having high energy and bit playing reactively, you kind of, it makes sense to stick with her.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I think actually, I think fairies is apart from I do find it hard to take Butterfingers, but mainly not because I dislike him, because I find it hard to drop anyone else. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
depends if you're taking pure fairies, but it's like, well, I could drop Tito. I don't really want to. Fencer, no, I like Fencer. Freya, I have to have. Wasp is great. Silvertongue's brilliant. Wait a second, I've run out of people.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the process that I go through, and he's the one that I've dropped most often as well, to be honest.
I mean, I play games where I thought I'm going to take Butterfingers because I don't take him and I need to try and use him more. And actually, I think he's perfectly good. I don't think he's any worse than any other fairies. I think he's just, I don't know, he's almost harder to use in that the other fairies have not as much as like humans do, but they often have like a singular purpose. So Tito is very much go and grab some moonstones and then don't
Yeah,
die because you can't kill her. Um,
yeah,
Fencer's happy to slip around the sides or down the middle and just go and kill stuff because good at it. Freya is your healer and fizzle popper basically. Wasp again in the middle with a 2-inch melee, getting very angry at everyone. Silvertongue is just messing with everyone as much as possible, and Diana is hitting people from range with spells, whereas Butterfingers almost takes a bit more tactics. I
yeah.
think.
And
Um,
also because he kind of the Butterfingers ability, his namesake ability, is most useful right at the very end of the game.
yeah,
It can kind of feel like you're not quite sure what to do with him for the first few turns.
yeah, yeah,
You're kind of waiting for his moment to be useful.
yeah.
Whereas the others, you don't so much have that feeling. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same. He's the one that I most often, because I, like you, I like to take a big guy with my fairies. I like Boulder um, because I mean the Gotchka is great if you've got Diana. If you don't have Diana, then Boulder is definitely the better option.
Yeah, agreed.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I don't take Gotchka if I had Diana. Otherwise, I would take Boulder too.
I mean the Calcify is so good because you just charge him right into the middle of the board and stand in the middle of all the moonstones. And anyone who comes in to try and pick up those moonstones or guard territory or do melee is now getting -1 energy,
Yeah,
which for fairies is no big deal at all. Like you've got so much energy. If you do have to come into his zone, oh well, I've lost 1 energy, no big deal. Someone like Fancy Hat comes into that zone and he's down to from 2 energy to 1. It's half his effectiveness.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, as you kind of just said, like and you said at the beginning, is that fairies don't often hold ground.
yeah,
So Boulder offers that option of holding some ground in a fairy list. Uh,
yeah, he does.
Wasp, other fairy, and if you have Wasp and him, you can kind of put them 5 inches apart and put them both at the middle of fire, and then you suddenly got quite a bubble in the middle, which you
Yeah,
can hold on with a bit.
and
Um,
I find it quite hard not to take Boulder now. He's become, a bit of a go-to for me with fairies. And like you said, I don't really want to have two big guys, Gotchka and Boulder. So
yeah, yeah. Well, also because I think if you take two big guys, well, first of all, they haven't got a lot of energy, so um, both of them can find it quite difficult to actually pick up moonstones, although they can pick them up easier than fairies. If you get bad luck and all the moonstones are 3s and 4s, which is a bit crap for fairies anyway,
yeah,
those two I think can make it even harder because that's not really. And also, if you have picked up a moonstone with Gotcha, then suddenly he's just going to get stuck because he hasn't got the energy to do the steps in the first place. So he's just a bit. He can't really get anywhere then. Um, so I think I think because in a fairy list, like you're enjoying the fact you've got a lot of energy. So why would you kind of cripple yourself by taking 2 characters that haven't got any, or have got very little.
Definitely.
Uh,
And they can't really boost the energy on the big guys because most of their like Silver Tongue's Whispered Secrets is target friendly fairy, and Diana's Feed on Fear is, it allows her to put energy on fairies, so they've got no way basically of bumping them up, which is as it's supposed to be, because you don't want a boulder with 5 energy. That would be
horrible.
ridiculously
OP. Just to sort of finish off then, and I'll let you do this as they're yours. Obviously, is talk about some of the new fairies.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said at the start of the recording how basically the newer characters that I've created, I think, are much more interesting. And there are 3 new fairies. There's one that's coming in our Kickstarter, which we are doing on the 27th of March. It's only 5 weeks away. Who's part of the brand new faction that we're launching, called the Leshervolt. And she's a priestess. And
so is she? Because I don't actually know as much about this one as I do the other 2. So I'll just. Is she still very much kind of with the other fairies, or is she? And this is more like the background. Maybe I should be asking Richie this, but is she still, like, say, is she still kind of under Diana's authority, or is she very much with the cult?
Good question. I don't know. We haven't defined the the fluff around her yet. Originally, I created her because there's a big rogue theme coming up, and the other 2 fairies that we've created recently are both rogues, and there's a whole lot of rogues matters abilities. In the first book, most of the keywords that we trigger off are racial. So target human gets +2 arcane on Quack, or target fairy gains +1 energy on some of the fairies. Moving into book 2, we've done a lot more abilities which trigger off profession type keywords. So target rogue gets, or target soldier gets, or for every soldier nearby, blah blah blah.
Target pirate as well as pirate ones as well too.
Yeah, which will allow a lot more like mixed race factions to become prevalent. So this character was originally going to be a rogue, because there's a lot of fairy rogues, and I only recently, within the last 2 weeks or so, thought actually this new faction, the Leshervolts, don't have a fairy yet. Fairies have only got 1 healer. They could do with another healer. So I made the change, and I was also thinking they could do with another priestess as well. So her background hasn't been defined at this stage.
No, that's fine. That's cool.
But I won't go through all of their abilities because obviously they're still in progress. But I'll quickly kind of
a quick overview of them would be great.
So
I know them, but everyone else doesn't.
So Belladonna has got to be one of the most fun characters to play ever. She's a fairy rogue. One of the things that's incredibly cool about her is she can swap places with a friendly rogue, which is so
great to do. It's so. I mean, we've done it in the game that you and I played, and we play tested it a bit. It's so much fun to just do that.
It's one of the most fun abilities I've ever played with. I've done so many janky shit with, moving her up the board and then swapping her places with the fencer, so the fencer's now, within striking distance of someone. I played a game with the pacifist build, fairy rogues versus the human clerics, and with the Brother Daniel character that's also coming in the Kickstarter, which is someone very dear to your heart, I believe.
Yeah,
Teleporting people around the place, and Belladonna swapping, swapping places. There was no fighting, but Kaufman was basically chasing fairies around the board, trying to give them money for their moonstones, and Belladonna was swapping places all the time so that he couldn't get to her.
yeah,
It's really interesting ability. The other one that's great, Acid Flask, more magical damage, short range. The other one I love is Drop of Nightshade on her, which is just awesome. So it triggers off any card. So a green makes the enemy lose energy, a blue makes them suffer wounds, but the pink, as always, because pink is kind of the color of the occult in our arcane deck, is the one you're after. It says, so it's only got a 1 inch range on this ability and it costs 3 energy. But if you get a pink card, move target enemy up to 4 inches, then you may have the target make a melee attack action controlled by you. They count as friendly during the melee attack action. So
yeah,
it's similar to Silvertongue's ability. He can do any ability that costs 1 energy, whereas this is only a melee attack. But she gets to move them 4 inches and then make a melee attack.
yeah.
So that's really good fun. Foxglove.
Well, also, do you want to mention the catastrophe on that as well?
Oh yeah, the catastrophes, pretty extraordinary. The target and this character are both slain, so
Yeah,
you can fly her in as a kamikaze pilot and take someone out,
yeah,
um, which is pretty cool. Or or it might be inflicted on you, but effectively, any card is good. A green reduces their energy, a blue does wounds to them, a pink sends them crazy and makes them run off and attack their own people, and a catastrophe kills them.
yeah,
Now, she's only got Arcane 2. Now, a lot of the fairies, all the fairies, in fact, in Book 1, have very good stat lines. They've got very high melee and very high arcane, and that's kind of been their thing. The two new fairies that are going to come in the blood magic box, along with Diana when she officially joins the ranks. They've only got Arcane 2 and Arcane 3, but they've got incredibly powerful abilities. And then there's a gnome rogue called Murade, who he's the ratty one you might have seen on Facebook, who gives friendly rogues +1 arcane. So he's really useful to use in combination with these two new fairies, particularly Belladonna. Like going up from Arcane 2 to Arcane 3 is really valuable.
yeah.
And then Foxglove, quickly, I won't go into too much detail on any of these. I'll do my best. He does. We mentioned earlier on in the call that Diana's the best damage dealer at the moment because she does X+1 magical damage with her horrifying visions. This guy's got atrophy and he withers people and he does 2x magical damage. So that's as much as Fire Spitter. It's only got a 6-inch range and it costs 3 energy and he's got 5 energy. So like so many others, you want to find a way of putting 1 extra energy on him. But if you can put that 1 extra energy on him so that he can do 2 attacks that do 2x magical damage, that's really quite significant. He's also got the Trickster ability, which I mentioned when we were talking about Freya.
Yeah.
So you can really mess with people's heads with bluffing on that damage, and that can be fun. And he's also got Shelter of the Shadowglade, which is several characters that are in development at the moment have got this new ability called Protection, which says the next time this character would suffer damage this turn, reduce that damage to 0. And he can basically put that protection onto a friendly fairy. So cool stuff. And also Diana Enraged. She's probably the most powerful character ever created for Moonstone, but you can only play with her in the one special scenario.
Yeah. No, she was fun. She was fun to make.
She's awesome. I can't wait to start playtesting with that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the Belladonna character was the Diana actually started off with, because the three sort of fairy slash rogue scenarios coming in the second book. Originally, when I was thinking the ideas for those, it was around Diana, and the narrative behind them is still basically Diana based. In a sense that it's all about her wanting that moonstone, but it then, with Belladonna coming in, it really helped round off those scenarios. It helped me when I was thinking about them to have another focus, because obviously, but in those three scenarios, Belladonna's as a character, as a named character in all of them.
Yeah.
I think that's, and the it actually really works with the narrative for them, that she can switch places with other rogues, which is fun. And it was fun to make a new character, Diana, well, not make a new character, but sort of boost Diana with Diana Enraged, because she's horrible.
Yeah, she's absolutely brilliant. So
Um,
I don't think we should go too much into her, because we're already over.
no, no, we won't go too much into her, but just, yeah, she's horrible, and I look forward to people seeing her in book 2.
Definitely.
Yeah, cool. I think we better leave it there, because that's gonna, yeah, as we've been, it's been a great chat. It's a long one.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. We won't obviously hang up yet, but I'll just round off this bit, and then you and I can have a chat again afterwards. But
Sure.
it was really fun to talk about fairies. I freaking love fairies. Absolutely love fairies. And yeah, I hope that listeners found that useful, fairy players, particularly because they are, as you've said before, and I agree, they are one of the harder ones to pick up and just play. So hopefully this will be useful for people who want to play fairies, what to do and what not to do with them, which is kind of why I wanted to pick. Well, I chose to do a faction podcast on fairies first. One, because they're my favourites, but two, because they are one of the hardest to use. Both of us said it before, that humans are very much point and click.
Yeah.
No, gnomes I think are probably also quite tricky, but slightly easier than fairies, in that you just clump them all together and move.
I think humans are point and click, run forward, engage, see what happens. Goblins have combos that when you first discover them, you'll be like, "Oh my god, that's amazing! That's so powerful." But then after a while, you're just reusing the same set pieces. Fairies are the ones you're going to have to think hard every single game, basically.
I think the thing, like with fairies, like activation order is more important with fairies than it is with others.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. Right, well, we'll round that one off there then. I hope you all enjoyed listening to that. Don't know what the next podcasts are going to be about. It depends if I can get Richie on the phone. If I can, it'll be about fluff, which is always fun to talk about as well, because the fluff is great. And that's episode 3 done. Thanks a lot for listening. Okay, this last bit is just after Tom's gone. I didn't realize I actually thank Tom for coming on. It's really good to talk to him about fairies and get his insights into playing them in different ways, which was great. So thanks a lot, Tom. And we'll see you for the next podcast.